Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of CS Cyber. I'm Chad.
I'm Sean.
And today we're going to talk about U.S. telecoms.
Yeah. Also known as cellular carriers. I've noticed everybody's stayed away from saying cellular. I'm not sure why. We're just calling them telecommunications providers. But this topic involves specifically cellular providers, but also when we start talking about Salt Typhoon, which is the threat actor in China, they also target internet service providers.
Which a lot of these are the same, right? So, maybe different parts of the business, but the same
correct.
companies. So, 8 U.S. telecom providers hacked by the Chinese, Salt Typhoon. We know of 4 of them, right? So there were AT&T, Verizon, T-Mobile, Lumen.
Correct. Those are the 4 we know of. I know Ann Nurburger came out with a bunch more, but I don't know who they are.
Yeah, and I think there's a couple that have still been unnamed for some reason.
Well, in the research that I've done, we did a webinar on this yesterday I did it for everybody. And then we had a PDF threat briefing that went with it. Anyway, during my research, those are the 4 that we know of. And the reason some of these are taking longer is because, and I love the word that they used, illuminate. It's taking a while for these companies to illuminate the threat actor, to actually see if they're in there.
Illuminate, like shine a flashlight on them?
Well, I liked that analogy, right?
Yeah.
I mean, because really this is a dark person that's sitting not visible, right? So you kind of need to put a flashlight on it to illuminate them.
Right.
I like the word.
It's just fun to say.
I'll use it many times. Illuminate.
How many times can you use it in this podcast?
I don't know. We'll find out real quick.
All right.
Somebody's going to count.
That's funny. All right. So we did a webinar on this yesterday. The recommendations were, really encryption is your friend, right? So the government was, telling people, hey, start using WhatsApp, Signal, these end-to-end encrypted communication channels for text and voice.
Yeah. So that's very... cue Alanis Morissette. Isn't that ironic that maybe Micah can work some Alanis Morissette into the podcast? Isn't that irony, though, that the federal government is encouraging encryption?
Well, I mean, I'm sure they have some operations that's going on that's going to be problematic for, but... Right,
exactly. Yeah, that was one of the recommendations. Actually, that was their primary recommendation, is that if you are having sensitive communications on public carrier networks, so if you've got AT&T, any of those carriers, right? Any cell phone carrier, and you're having sensitive conversations over voice or text, you need to take action. And those actions were, for example, if you're iPhone to iPhone and you're using iMessage to iMessage, you're good.
And FaceTime is included in that too.
Okay, good.
Did research, yeah. So their FaceTime, that call, and videos is end-to-end encrypted as well.
So that's awesome. So that's good, right? But what happens if you've got like iPhone to Android? Well, that's not going to work, right? Unless you're both using Google Messages, which I assume you can use Google Messages on iPhone. But it's a one-to-one thing. So Google Messages to Google Messages, iMessage to iMessage, all those are end-to-end encrypted. So that covers text messaging.
So app to app.
App to app, that covers text messaging. What about voice? Now we have to use Signal or WhatsApp.
Right. Which is really a change in workflow, right? I mean, everyone's just used to picking up their phone and doing it, but now you have to open Signal. And you kind of covered this on the webinar yesterday. Government entities they shouldn't be talking about classified information over these networks anyways. But to your point, a lot of day-to-day just critical infrastructure, police and fire, just things just happen, right? So maybe those do get used.
Well, I was talking to somebody yesterday, about law enforcement. I used to be a police officer, and it was very common for me to pull out my personal cell phone because maybe the radio's busy or whatever, or I'm wanting to have a conversation with somebody not on the radio, right? Because people have scanners and stuff, and you can listen to radio communications. So we would commonly use our cell phones to have conversations about search warrants and coordinating search warrants. And I mean, you would do some of that on the phone. You can't do that now. Like you could, but now we're talking about an active compromise published, active and confirmed compromise to almost all U.S. cellular networks.
Which is really unprecedented. I mean, this is uncharted territory for most, right?
How the news media is not all over this, I have absolutely no idea.
I'm really surprised about that too, because it is not on the front page of any major news outlet's website.
I know. I don't know if it just got it like it did eventually show up. CNN ran an article yesterday, and I'm sure some of the others did. I honestly haven't even been through our content system yet to even see who all picked it up. It was a lot, but it's not being bubbled up. The news cycle currently is clogged up with things like Syria and the United Healthcare CEO shooting. Yeah. So I don't know if that's kind of pushed it down, but it's unprecedented, especially when the federal government comes out, like the DOJ, the FBI, and CISA came out and said you should probably use WhatsApp and Signal for your voice phone calls because that's encrypted.
Yeah,
That's amazing. And the reason is because they believe that in the course of doing the investigation, they believe that voice calls were accessed.
Yeah.
I think a lot of that was accessed through the CALIA system, which I believe is what law enforcement uses for wiretapping. So all of your cell carriers and phone companies are prepared to do wiretaps, right? Because that's a legal request. So they have to have a system to do that, and they believe that was accessed.
That's scary.
It is scary. It is very scary. So what do you do, right? So what you do is, we can put the links to the webinar and those types of things in the description. What you do is educate yourself on what's going on. Number one, that's why we're here, right? So if you have a cell phone, you need to pay attention to what we're talking about. Number two is take some type of action. So if you're a corporation, you're going to have to check with your C-level folks and your executives. You're going to need to brief them and the board maybe and find out. You might have to institute some type of emergency operation to integrate Signal and WhatsApp into your environments and use them. I was talking to somebody else yesterday about, there could be some serious regulatory and legal concerns with using those platforms because of the lack of transparency of where those platforms originate and where their data is. Completely understand that, but we're really up against the wall here.
Yeah.
And then what do we do from a policy perspective?
We kind of talked about that on the webinar, right? So internally to Secure Cyber, we've already kind of planned for this, and signals actually are out of band, right? So we've used that when we have like Microsoft Outlook outages or Teams outages. We'll convert to that. But really, it's already in our policy, right? So collectively, we've decided like this is our messaging app. We're comfortable with this. These are the things that can be discussed over that app, and we've just documented in our acceptable use policy.
Yeah, because we had those questions on the webinar. People were really not sure, how do I do the policies and procedures? And, you just said, look, you have to put something in writing. So just put it in writing and then do it. If it's an emergency acceptable use type thing, you're going to have to do the best you can because you're really, and we introduced the term operational security on the webinar as well. Like you're really going to have to look at your OPSEC plan and really understand who you are. So are you a police department? Are you a hospital? Are you an IT department that works for somebody in critical infrastructure?
Yeah, I think that idea of OPSEC is really foreign to a lot of people unless you've been in the military or around law enforcement. It's just something I think in the U.S. that we just don't think about day in, day out, right? So,
yeah, no, I totally agree. We're really entering into an interesting time in the world, right? Like I said in the webinar yesterday, I really never thought I'd have to have an OPSEC training program for the general public. But it's really getting to that, right? I mean, it's really getting to the acknowledgement that we are in a digital war right now, a digital Cold War. Even though we don't see tanks rolling down the street and we don't see troops in the parking lot and stuff, this is a digital war. It's just something you can't see.
Yeah, and that's really foreign to a lot of people.
Yeah,
I think. So.
No, it is. Excuse me, goodness. All right, so let's talk.
Oh,
goodness.
You okay?
All right, yeah, I'm fine.
All
right, so let's talk about the changes to the podcast.
Right. So starting in 2025, we're going to change the format of the podcast a little bit. So we're going to change it to do some deeper dives on specific topics. Right. So CS Cyber will be more education based. I think we're going to go through the CIS controls, the top 18, really kind of break them down and kind of give you things that you can do to get better aligned.
Yeah.
Right.
Nope. Yeah, absolutely.
So with that said, it won't be so news cycle driven. That's going to be our weekly cyber update.
Yeah. Yep. I have a show that runs, I believe Micah posts it on Saturday mornings, Saturday afternoons, where we do, a cycle where we dive into kind of the bigger headlines. And we may actually end up expanding that show a little bit and maybe taking some time to spend time on particular articles. But yeah, next week, we'll do the 2025 predictions.
Yep.
And then we'll take a short break for Christmas and then come back right into the new format.
Yep. So we'll see you then.
All right. Everybody, thanks for attending, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks.